안녕하십니까.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Jo Sun-mi, working at the Korea Rural Economic Institute. I would first like to express my appreciation to all of you who are joining here. I would also like to express my gratitude to the institutes and organizations that have helped us in putting together this session. I will be the MC of the session. Before we begin the session, I'd like to make some housekeeping announcements. There will be a photo session after the session is over. Now let us begin the session. First of all, I am going to invite President Kim Hong-sang for the Korea Rural Economic Institute. He's going to deliver his opening remarks. Please welcome him with a big round of applause.
예.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Kim Hong-sang, President of the Korea Rural Economic Institute. There are many challenges due to COVID-19. I would like to thank you for joining us for the Global Korea Convention. The Global Korea Convention is co-organized by the NRC and LH, and this convention is to promote inclusiveness, co-prosperity, peace, and sustainable development of the global community. And Korea wishes to be a global leader in promoting global solidarity and cooperation. And under this theme, we have many sessions where we will discuss global Korea initiatives and strategies to implement this initiative. The Korea Rural Economic Institute has prepared a session on agriculture, fisheries, and forestry. I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to the Korea Maritime Institute, Korea Rural Community Corporation, Korea Forest Service, Ministry of Agriculture and Food, Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology, and Korea Overseas Agro-Resource Development Association. As you may know, agriculture, fisheries, and forestry is the basis for economic and social development of developing countries, and it is crucial for achieving SDGs. So far, Korea has been providing assistance and support to developing countries based on our policy and technology experiences in the areas of agriculture, fisheries, and forestry. As we are going through the challenging times of COVID-19 pandemic, we understand that promoting food security and nutrition, as well as smart farming and digital New Deal, will be crucial for further development. It is estimated that the maritime and fisheries industry is going to be about $3 trillion in size in 10 years. And Korea has the potential to become a leader in ocean-based blue economy. As such, it is crucial for Korea to promote international development cooperation with coastal developing countries. In this background, we have prepared a session where relevant organizations and institutions on agriculture, fisheries, and forestry will discuss how we can implement the Global Korea Initiative and how we can further strengthen international cooperation in the post-COVID-19 era. In this session, we will hear about the current status and support policies for agriculture development assistance in other countries, as well as international cooperations on fisheries and maritime affairs and ODA projects for sustainable development. And there will be presentations and discussions. It is time to pull together our wisdom in order to overcome this crisis. In this sense, I hope that this session will be an opportunity to facilitate exchanges and cooperation among the relevant institutions and agencies in order to strengthen international cooperation on agriculture, forestry, and fisheries for future development. With that, I'd like to conclude my opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President Kim Hong-sam, for your opening remarks. For this session, we have 3 presentations. The presentations will be on overseas achievements in the field of agriculture, SDGs, and ODA. The first presentation will be by Mr. Kim Jong-sun of the Korea Rural Economic Institute. He will present concerning Korean companies working overseas in the field of agriculture and policies to support them. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Good morning. As have been introduced, I am Kim Jong-sun of KREI. The topic for my presentation today is the current status of Korean companies working overseas in the field of agriculture. I will jump right into my presentation due to the time constraint. Here in the table of contents, you will be able to see that I will be presenting the current status of Korean companies working overseas in the field of agriculture. And I would like to also talk about some policy goals as well as setting some goals for achievements. According to our law related to international cooperation of developing agriculture and forestry resources, companies working overseas must register, and there have been 195 companies that have registered. And as of today, that number has grown to 208. This figure is for September of 2020. And we can see that there are 4 different types of companies. Companies that have actually moved into overseas markets, companies that have moved in but have withdrawn, companies that are planning to move into other companies, and companies who have given up. So there are 4 different types of companies. So of the 195 registered companies, 67 are currently working overseas. Let's take a look at some statistics for the 67 companies that are actually working overseas. The surveys were conducted between October and November of this year. The data presented here are the data that have been surveyed until the end of November, and we are in the process of analyzing the data. So the data that we have presented here are the interim results. If we take a look at the companies where the companies are countries where the companies are working at, we can see that 29 companies are currently working in Southeast Asia, and we can see 14 are working in Asia outside of Southeast Asia. 10 companies are working in Russia and Central Asia. We can see that 26 of the companies have moved outside of Korea from 2011 to 2015. We can see that the average investment amount is 5.7 billion won. We can see that a bulk of the companies are investing less than 1 billion won, and 18% of the companies have invested more than 10 billion won. You can see that there is a wide spread in the investment scale. You can see that the average is 5.7, but most companies have a smaller scale investment. Most of the investments overseas have been conducted to secure land as well as buildings. Here you can see the average profit rates. From 2017, profits have been increasing. Of course, this year, due to COVID-19, there has been a slight drop. You can see that overall, there's about a 10% profit rate. Let's take a look at some fields that these companies are working in. Of the 67 companies, 68% are in production of agriculture, fisheries, or forestry goods. 49% are in logistics, and you can see that 37% of them conduct end-to-end business, including production to distribution. And if we take a look at the items, corn and mill takes up the bulk amount. And you can see that they usually hire local employees through people that they know. So it's usually the case that low-skilled workers are employed at these companies. Let's take a look at the survival rates of these companies. So we have conducted the survey until the end of November, and we are in the process of analyzing the data. So here you can see the data from last year when we conducted our own research. We took a look at the difference, the gap between the actual companies starting to work overseas and when they started to register. So we could see that for most companies, they start working overseas first before they register, which means that they do not have sufficient opportunities to learn about the market and plan ahead. If we take a look at the survival rate of these companies, it's 67%, and the average length of survival is 5.9%. We see that 20% of the companies withdraw from foreign markets within 3 years, which means that after 3 years, the survival rate stabilizes. Let's take a look at the types of businesses. We see that companies in production compared to food processing or distribution, their survival rates are higher. And if we take a look at the regions, compared to the southern hemisphere, companies working in the northern hemisphere have a better survival rate. Let's take a look at the investment types. We see that companies that have a JV have a higher survival rate. And obviously, this is quite natural. The higher the investment, the higher the survival rate. This is analysis based on the Cox regression model, and you can see that the results are quite similar. When the company receives subsidies from the government, we can see that subsidies have a positive impact on the survival rate. Of course, it's not statistically significant, but we see that there is a positive effect. So in order to heighten the survival rate, we will need to expand the support by the government. Here we can see that I have been talking about the current status based on interim results, but to summarize the data, we can see that 1/3 of the companies that have registered actually work overseas. And of the companies that are actually working overseas, we see that not all of them survive, and the companies that have registered, of them, 44% of them actually do not start working overseas. So after registering, until they actually start working overseas, we will need additional government support. And if we take a look at investments, we see that many of the companies have small-scale investments. As I mentioned before, the scale of investments has a positive impact on the survival rate, and so we need to find policy support to help companies increase the volume of their investment. And if we take a look at management results, the revenues and profit rates are on the increase. In terms of production, we can see that many of the companies working overseas were concentrating on production, And if you take a look at sales, a bulk of the produced goods have been brought back to Korea, and there's also a certain amount that has been sold locally. Other than grains, we need to secure food security in Korea, and as long as we are importing food, we can utilize these Korean companies working overseas. And we see that many of the companies went through difficulties in the process of working overseas or planning to work overseas. And so in this process, we would need to provide them with support in information collection and training. And without a secure plan, it's very difficult to survive in an overseas market. So we would need professional support concerning these stages. And during the early stages, when initial investments are necessary, they would need to be provided with market information. In the production or sales stage, we need to provide these companies with information about the market that they are entering. So, what would be the production environment, the investment climate, and other factors? So all of these information should be provided to the companies before they actually start working overseas. We can see that the satisfaction for policies was overall quite low, and so we would need to expand policy support at the same time, provide more information about the available policies. And here are the requests from the companies. They would like to have information about a variety of companies, and they would also like to see more financial support. And concerning the import of the goods that they have produced overseas, they would like support concerning tariffs and transportation costs. So all of the costs involved in importing their goods back to Korea are the issues that they would like to see solutions for. Here are some of the policy goals. In 2017, the third comprehensive plan was announced, and that plan lasted from 2018 to 2022. And that plan actually includes the determination to expand overseas marketing of our products and also to facilitate companies to go overseas and work in foreign markets. Due to COVID-19, we also realized the importance of having a secure supply of agricultural goods. And so, another policy goal that has been at the focus is the stable supply of agricultural goods. So the policy direction in the future is to make sure that there are not silos of these policies, but we need to make sure that we work hand in hand so that the two pillars of secure supply and facilitating Korean companies to work overseas go hand in hand. So the two goals that I just mentioned are the goals that we are trying to achieve through these performance goals. And each of the performance goals has performance indicators. So in order to help companies work overseas, we need to build capacity and we need to find support for the companies. In order to have a secure supply of imported agricultural goods, we need to produce more overseas, and we also need to find ways to support the import of goods produced by Korean companies. We need to increase the number of companies that actually work overseas, and we also need to expand loans provided to these companies. We need to make sure that more companies register, and that more companies utilize the policies. We also need to provide them with consulting and training opportunities. And we need to make sure that we have more participants for consulting and training. In order to facilitate the companies taking root in foreign markets, we need to have indicators such as the number of companies overseas and the number of companies that actually settle down in foreign markets, as well as the survival rates of these companies. In order to have a production base overseas, we need to have indicators for the number of companies producing foods and the land area that is used. In order to expand the import of such goods, we need to have indicators for the volume of imported goods and the number of companies working overseas and exporting their finished goods back to Korea. And we also decided the weight for each of the indicators through the AHP analysis. The AHP survey is currently ongoing, and the figures that you see here are the figures from the 9 experts that we have surveyed. You can see that 0.59 is the weight for facilitating companies to work overseas, and 0.41 is the weight for securing the supply of foreign goods. And you can see that the weight for building capacity is 0.58, and the weight for the goal of bringing back the goods produced by Korean companies was 0.54. You can see that the weight for the number of companies receiving loans was quite high, and the weight for the number of companies that survive was quite high, and the weight for the actual volume of produced goods was high, and the weight for the indicator for the volume of agricultural goods imported back to Korea was high. And so we have actually applied these weights to the indicators that we are currently using. And now we have the actual figures for the goals. We can see that the enhancement of capacity was 57.1, providing more support was 55.9, and it's meaningless to compare the numbers to each other. We would like to see that 55.9 stands at 100, and so we have a base of 100 points, and then we can come up with the actual indicators, and we can see that the 2020 figure is 77, but if we say that the 77 is 100, then you can see that we can compare these figures with future figures so that we can continue to compare this in the mid to long term. And so, based on this, we have the mid to long term goals, and you can see that the actual detailed performance indicators have been set as goals so that we can increase the indicators showing an increase in the actual quality of these goals. Thank you very much.
네, 우리 농기업의 해외 농업
Thank you very much
분야의 정
For your presentation on the support for Korean companies working overseas in the field of agriculture.
Next, I'm going to invite Mr. Han Deok-kun from the Korea Maritime Institute. His presentation will be on international cooperation on fisheries and maritime affairs for achieving SDGs, and there will be a video message from Professor Mandao Gueye of Senegal's ENFM. Please welcome him with a big hand.
예, 안녕하십니까.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Han Deok-kun, Center Director at the Korea Maritime Institute. First of all, I would like to say that it is my honor to have this chance to give a presentation. I am going to discuss how we can promote international cooperation on maritime and fisheries areas in order to achieve the SDGs. There are three parts in my presentation. First of all, I'm going to discuss the connection between SDGs and maritime and fisheries affairs. And secondly, I'm going to discuss some specific KOICA and ODA projects for international development projects that KMI has been pursuing. And finally, I'm going to discuss the overall directions of international cooperation in the future, and then I will show you the short video message. First, I want to discuss the significance of oceans. The oceans take up 71% of the Earth's surface, and they account for 97% of the water circulation. They control the environment, and also the oceans take up 99% of Korea's import and export, and you can find abundant marine resources and species inside the oceans. So we always say that oceans have great potentials. But now, as the global economic growth is slowing down, there is a growing attention to the blue economy and the importance of oceans for economic development. And I believe that this is something that we need to pay a key attention to. These are the estimated values of oceans, and you can see that the value of the oceans, when all the other value adds are combined, would be $24 trillion per year. Currently, the annual gross marine product is about $2.5 trillion, which is ranked at the 7th compared to 14th of Korea. However, there are many challenges. As with other sectors, we have climate change, acidification, and marine waste problems, and overfishing and pollution. So these are quite significant challenges. And in relations to the SDGs, the advanced countries are able to address these challenges, but the developing countries are not really able to address these challenges, and this is where we need to provide assistance. Number 14 of the SDGs is about marine environment, but the marine and fisheries include many other aspects. So I can say that the marine environment is related to the other SDGs as well. As of 2019, KOICA, EDCF, and all the other ODA projects would amount to 44.3 billion won, so it is only 1.4% of the total ODA of Korea. And there are loans extended for transportation and warehousing, but as for grants, they were mainly for fisheries and education. You may refer to this table for more information. Now moving on to the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries. The title is cooperation with the coastal states, and the budget for 2020 is 15.5 billion won. And most of these ministry-driven ODA projects are in the forms of grants, bilateral grants. Before 2010, we used to supply goods for assistance, but now our ODA projects encompass a variety of areas, including education and training. Let's compare the size of ODA against Japan. Currently, as of 2018, Japan's maritime ODA is $13.2 billion, but our size is much smaller. So our ODA size is about only 6% of what Japan has been providing to the developing countries. So we need to increase our maritime-related ODAs. Now, I'd like to give you some specific cases. We have been collaborating with research institutes and international organizations for international development promotion. And we have been building a network of researchers. And in Myanmar, Peru, Fiji, Russia, and China, and Spain, we have overseas operations as well. Now we are operating the International Development Cooperation Center based on the Basic Act on the Development of Marine and Fisheries Industries. We have the legal basis for designating ourselves as a key research institute. And we are now in the process of putting together plans for the future. But first of all, we are focused on identifying future assistance opportunities and building statistical bases and also providing training and education. These are the medium and long-term strategies, which will be in line with the objectives of the government, including job creation and following the new Southern and new Northern policies. And we will also utilize multilateral ODA projects, and there will be strengthening of assistance in various areas. I'm going to give you some more details about each of these areas. First of all, the Yeosu Academy. After the Yeosu Fair was concluded, there was this Yeosu Academy that was initiated to provide training for young people, and this year this was taken as the ODA project. And there are many other success cases that I'm going to cover at the end. The second project is providing training for sailors in Vietnam based on the bilateral agreement between Korea and Vietnam, and also based on the MOU between the two countries. So this was a ministry-level ODA project, and KMI was the executing institute. And even though we had challenges due to COVID-19, in September, we were able to provide this educational ship, which will be used for training and education, and we will continue to carry out training ODA project going forward. Now, KMI has this general initiative for global maritime research cooperation. One more point that I want to make is that since 2010, we have been holding Korea-Africa Fisheries Forum. Since 2011, Korea-South Pacific Fisheries Forum, and since 2016, Korea-Latin America Fisheries Forum. So it is mainly about us going to these countries and building a research network. And we are going to continue to utilize this network. And by utilizing the network, we were able to identify ODA opportunities, such as the case in Senegal. And so we're also asking other relevant organizations to utilize this network as a platform. Vietnam and Myanmar, and there were online training sessions provided, and we will also continue to work with other developing countries. And we are involved in the North Pacific Arctic Research Community. In 2013, Korea was designated as an observer along with China and Japan. In order to increase our role as the observer, we initiated this North Pacific Arctic Research Community based on the initiative of Korea. And this year, we are celebrating the Arctic Week. And in Busan, many institutes were invited, and there's this council discussion going on. And as part of this council, we have the Korea Arctic Academy that is connecting relevant universities for training and education. The Asia Pacific Maritime Policy Research Project is conducted along with UN ESCAP and PEMSIA. And we have Korea-Russia Joint Research Institute or project in Russia. And we also have China Research Center. Moving on to the ENFM education in Senegal, we sent a 100-ton ship for training purposes. And since 2017, for 4 years, by this year, we provided training on site. This was received very well. And as you can see in these pictures, for the past 4 years, we have carried out various activities, and they will all be put together in this report. As for this next project, we were scheduled to have this from this year for 3 years, but we were not able to do so this year due to COVID-19, but we will initiate this project next year via online. Now I'm going to discuss the future plans. There are many different plans that we have been putting together, but first of all, we have to make a revision so that the Minister of Oceans and Fisheries should be included in the Committee for International Development Cooperation. And currently, Senegal is the only country that is included in the ODA framework with fisheries and maritime industry indicated, but we have to include this area more for the ODAs. And we need to have regular interactions with OCOICA and EDCF. And we also have to make sure that ODA package is designed that it would include fisheries and marine related topics. In addition, there are high-level meetings organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we need to provide content support. And we want to support various seminars and workshops. And we also plan to promote multilateral cooperation with international organizations. And we need to pursue a more integrated ODA project that encompasses other areas. It's not just about fisheries and marine affairs, but also we need to connect them to other projects. For instance, in Vietnam, there is the mangrove-related project pursued by the Minister of Agriculture. This is a wonderful project, and we can make connections to this kind of project. And in many developing countries, they have agro-fishery industries prevalent. So this is something that we need to promote so that we can have a more integrated approach. And there are many demands for farming and other related technology from the developing countries. And also there's a demand for coastal management due to climate change. And these kinds of integrated approaches have been implemented by advanced countries. And I believe that Korea also needs to apply this kind of integrated approach that encompasses various industries. So these are the three action plans. And to do so, we all need to have a regular consultation with COICA and EDCF and other relevant organizations. Moving on to some specific plans related to the new southern and new northern policies. In Kyrgyzstan, we are now in the process of discussing establishing an institute. When the Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan visited Korea, there was the summit-level MOU. And based on this MOU, we are carrying out the feasibility study. And also with Myanmar, we are now identifying research opportunities. In Fiji and Kiribati, we are now discussing sustainable fishing and sustainable industries. And with Western Africa, especially with Senegal and Ghana, we are planning to promote exchanges and strengthening capacity of female fishermen and many other infrastructure projects. Now, can you please play the video?
네, 베트남을 국빈 방문 중인 문재인 대통령은
President Moon Jae-in is visiting Vietnam, and there will be a summit meeting. Korea ASEAN Special Summit meeting is being held in Busan. By expanding cooperation on culture and technology, Vietnam will be a key partner in implementing new southern policy. And in order to strengthen our bilateral cooperation, there is a special project that is underway by KMI. The Hannara Ho ship is delivered to Vietnam as part of ODA, and this ship will be utilized for sailors training and education in Vietnam so that capacity building can take place. There was an agreement between Korea and Vietnam in 2019 at the summit meeting, and an MOU was signed. And this was carried out as a grant project for 2020 ODA. We're not just giving away a ship, but also there are many sailors from Vietnam in Korea. And we're planning to carry out an ODA project to strengthen the capacity of these sailors. In the past, Vietnam Maritime University had some difficulties in training their students because they didn't have the school vessel. But after 3 months of repair, the ship is now going to sail to Vietnam. This ship was in operation for more than 20 years as the training ship. Because this is designed as a training ship, it has many facilities and equipment that are suitable for training. It can contain 152 students and 30 crew members. In April, KMI hosted this training session, and there was a meeting to discuss the details about this project. And they were able to share experiences and also discuss specific plans to promote mutual training. And finally, in September, after several postponements, the final signing ceremony was held. And this would be a new beginning for further cooperation between the two countries. And it was thanks to the dedication and hard work of many people. Now, the Vietnam Maritime University will be able to utilize this vessel for on-site training and education of their students. We believe that this project will be able to facilitate further bilateral cooperation between the two countries.
부산항을 떠나
Now the ship is sailing off of Busan port to Haiphong port in Vietnam. And the ship is going to help students learn to become more capable crew members. And this will also help them dream a bigger dream for the future. Now the new challenge of this Hannara ship will begin. We're holding hands together and we dream for a better future for the two countries.
I greet all the members of the Republic of Korea, and in particular the KMI with its maritime expertise. With your permission, sir, I will introduce the wonderful contribution of the donation of the school ship, the Jandair, for Senegal, for the practice and navigation and training of the seabed. The government of the Republic of Korea has set up a project to support fishing establishment and infrastructures in African coastal countries. The main objective of the program is to develop the capacity and livelihoods in the countries of west coast of Africa. To achieve this objective, a school vessel was donated in December 2015 of the Senegal Ministry of Fisheries and Economy with aim to promoting maritime education, in particular the strengthening of navigation safety. In Senegal, the fishing sector constitutes an essential component of economic development on both fishing and social, and fishing is a source of concurrency. Fishing directly employs 20% of the population. Let abandon it, but were lost in pollution of marine waters constitute a major problem in Senegal, and this has worrying repercussions of marine species and pose a threat to ship. It is the moment to thank the Republic of Korea for the donation of the ship, which will lead an effective fight for the cleaning of the seabed, and especially the practice for our students to approach by skills. Thanks for KMI for the support and training. This ship donation will also allow Senegal to preserve its policy of our ocean and sea for future generation and achieve the Millennium Development Goals. Thank you for your attention.
예, 감사합니다. 발표 모두.
Thank you very much for your attention.
네, SDG 달성을 위한
Thank you very much for your presentation on the international cooperation for SDGs. Thank you to Mr. Han Duck-kun. The last presentation will be presented by Mr. Kim Jin-wook of the Korea Rural Community Corporation concerning cooperation to enhance the sustainability of ODAs. Please welcome him with a big round of applause. Thank you very much. Pleased to meet you. I am the last presenter for this session. I am Kim Jin-wook of the Korea Rural Community Corporation. The topic that I will be covering is the cooperation between agriculture-related agencies to enhance the sustainability of ODA. I have actually created a model which I will present through this presentation. First, I would like to introduce our corporation and the overview of international cooperation, how to create a partnership, and I would like to present a model at the end of my presentation. Let me first introduce the Korea Rural Community Corporation. In 1908, we were established as a co-op in Jeonbuk. And in 2000, we were able to bring together 3 agencies related to agriculture. And in 2005, we changed our name to the Korea Agriculture Agency. And in 2008, we have expanded our scope to include fishing villages and came up with the name Korea Rural Community Corporation. Here you could see our missions. So we are covered under the relevant law, and we have a farmland bank and farmland management function. We also have the function of promoting the increase of productivity in agriculture and to contribute to rural communities. So we conduct landfills and modernization of fishing and farming villages. We also conduct irrigation development, the maintenance of irrigation facilities, and the improvement of water quality. We also conduct farmland-based pension systems so that we can enhance the capabilities and competitiveness of fishing and rural villages. We also conduct activities to enhance the exchanges between urban areas and rural areas. Here you can see some of our major overseas projects. Based on the Korean activities that I have mentioned, we focus on sharing our infrastructure technology and development of rural communities. We have 3 main pillars. We have technology transfer, support for companies moving overseas, and also international cooperation. We work through international organizations such as MDV, and we participate in the technology transfer or technology exports. Second, we cooperate with private companies so that these private companies can move to foreign markets, or we can provide aid for the development of rural communities overseas. In 1967, we went to Vietnam for the first time, and up until now, we have been working with 39 countries in Asia, Africa, and Latin America to conduct 159 projects. And in 2000, the Ministry of Food, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs has designated us as the ODA Execution Agency. and from 2009 we have conducted government-funded projects. Here you can see the current status of our projects. As of 2020, we have 40 ongoing projects in 17 countries covering ODA projects and technology transfers. Next, let's take a look at the international cooperation. If we take a look at ODA by Korea, as of 2020, we provide 3.4 trillion won worth of aid. This actually includes aid and loans, and 9.9% of that is in agriculture, fisheries, and forestry. To the best of my knowledge, according to data by international organizations, support in agriculture is twice or 3 times more effective compared to ODA in other areas because it is directly related to the food of the recipients. Here you can see the budget for the Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Affairs in 2020. It covers 34 projects worth 71.1 billion won, and of that, we conduct 19 projects worth 17.9 billion won. The Ministry of Food, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs are conducting projects for cooperation in planning and also cooperation for multilateral aid. Mostly, we participate in the first kind, where we provide materials and human resources for the planning portion, for example, capacity building and then the subsequent construction. With multinational organizations, the Ministry of Food, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs signs MOUs to conduct various programs to tackle global issues. And we also have the CAPEX projects, which are consulting projects. For example, we would conduct joint research, or we would invite recipient countries to come to Korea for training. As you see on the screen, from 2011, we have conducted various projects such as building infrastructure to increase the income of rural communities, such as irrigation dams, treatment after harvest, processing facilities, or having test beds for training. We also conducted projects to improve the living environment of the local community, such as building village centers or providing drinking water facilities. In order to build capacity, we conduct training for farming technologies. We also invite farmers or government officials to Korea to conduct training. The third part of my presentation will cover cooperation with other agriculture-related agencies in Korea. So our corporation and the ministry has conducted a converged program from 2018 along with the KOICA, MOFA, MOTI, and the Rural Community Corporation. From 2018, we have conducted 6 programs. We have expanded that to 14 in this year. We usually cooperate with the Rural Community Corporation, and they actually participate mostly focused on developing specific varieties and expanding that to R&D training. What we do is we take the results of the R&D and work on facility provision or infrastructure building to enable farmers to actually use the results of such research. Why do we need collaboration between agriculture-related agencies? When we conduct individual projects, we see that on the average, we spend about 3.5 billion won per project. Of course, we do have great results from these projects, and capacity building and environmental improvements, technology transfers have been achieved. But because these projects are in silos, it's very difficult to make the results sustainable. And because different agencies have their own projects, sometimes it's difficult to foster expertise in these areas. And so we thought that based on the ODAs that we are conducting, combining that with the needs of the recipient countries, we could converge all of these projects and have a partnership. So in the end, we are looking to share Korean experience, so we need a model to comprehensively share the development experience of Korea. If we collaborate between agencies, we believe that we will have very good results. Through collaboration, we could have efficient execution of budget, and we could also converge individual projects to enhance efficacy as well as sustainability. And we could make the model systematic so that we would have easy information sharing as well as discovery of new projects. So if we could have a collaboration model which we could plan and execute together, it would be more efficient. And I would like to propose such a model at the end of my presentation. So we look forward to various agencies working together. In order to do that, we would need a communication channel. So that is why we need a partnership. Through this partnership, we would be able to share information to enhance understanding of various projects. And because we have projects at different agencies, through the partnership, we would be able to facilitate each other's understanding, discover new projects, reduce redundancies, as well as fragmentations. And so this year in May, we have worked with various agencies related to agriculture through the Ministry of Food, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs to conduct a partnership. And we actually used an online platform to conduct discussions. We hope that we could expand this to international organizations, private companies, recipient countries, and NGOs so that we could have a agricultural ODA platform. This would help us discover projects together and plan projects together as well as execution. Here is the proposal for the model. As I have mentioned before, through coming up with such a partnership, we would be able to have a centralized development support model. So we would be able to have long-term planning with strategic support. And so that is the model that we believe is necessary. In order to do so, we would need to have a certain scale of budget. And on the average, current projects last from 3 to 5 years, but we could expand that to projects for 5 years or longer. And we could also drill down into specific areas of support. So if we would conduct such a project, these would be the performance results that we could expect. For example, we could support the establishment of an administrative system and in the long run, enhance public administration. In terms of facility, we could build infrastructure which would enhance farming activities, which would then translate into higher production and the eradication of poverty. We could build capacity to foster experts in the beneficiary country to enhance the level of education, which would then create a virtuous cycle within the local area. We could create a value chain that could contribute to the eradication of hunger. So this is the proposed model. For example, this is a model of a development project at the beneficiary country for rice farming. So you can see that it includes irrigation systems, treatment after harvest, as well as marketing, distribution of the finished goods, including food processing. These days, many villages are suffering from extreme weather conditions due to climate change, and therefore safety inspections are also very important, which are included in Korea's proposed Green New Deal. And so in Korea, we have a system where comprehensive safety investigations are conducted, for example, for dams every 10 years. And so that is why we have included this in this project. For example, we have a 8 billion won project to do a safety investigation for a dam in Myanmar. And so this should be also included in a comprehensive plan. We believe that this would create a virtuous cycle that could lead to reinvestments. We need to develop irrigation facilities, land development, and farming machinery. We also need to provide policy consulting and come up with a master plan for the beneficiary village. We also need to establish a co-op. We also need to develop capacity for the public officials. We also need to conduct education for different varieties of crops that are farmed. This would include the development of varieties as well as the supply of varieties that are more stringent and more vigilant to environmental changes so that we could create a virtuous cycle. For different villages, we need to improve the living environment, and we also need to utilize the special crops grown in those villages to create a foundation for tourism, possibly. So, by coming up with a partnership amongst relevant organizations, we believe that each organization can play a different role. So the ministry can be the overseeing organization. The Animal and Plant Quarantine Agency can participate in establishing a quarantine and disease control system. The National Agriculture Products Quality Management Service can come up with a system for quality management. Korea Seed and Variety Service can help with developing varieties, supplying varieties, and capacity building. NH is a management expert, so they can work with microfunding or branding. At our corporation, we are a production-based expert. For the Korea Agency for Education, Promotion, and Information Service in Food, Agriculture, Forestries, and Fisheries, they can work on smart farms and building capacity for local government workers. For the Korea Institute for Animal Products Quality Evaluation, they can work on agricultural products quality management. For the Korea Agriculture Machineries Industry Cooperative, they can work on the supply of machinery. The Rural Development Administration can work on establishing an R&D foundation. Korea Forest Service can work on reforestation, as well as creating carbon zero or carbon neutral villages, or they could help with establishing renewable energy or eco-tours. The Korea Rural Economic Institute, as you're well aware, could conduct master planning or policy consulting so that they can set the overall direction. So, having set this model, if we actually execute this model, we expect that the production volume will increase. There will be higher quality production, which will increase the overall amount of food production. We could also look forward to high quality and high profit crops, which will then lead to the increase in the income of the farming villages. We could also have villages that play the role of a hub, and these hubs then could impact the neighboring villages. And this could lead to the establishment of a development model for the increase of food production in developing countries. We could also conduct branding of the villages. We could also diversify the income for the village, and that could lead to new values for the village itself. So in conclusion, we have 41 government agencies conducting ODA projects. Our ministry and our corporation, we believe that agriculture-related organizations should form a partnership so that we can connect all of our relevant ODAs. This would help us plan and discover projects together, which would then be able to enable us to provide comprehensive projects. We look forward to your interest and cooperation. Thank you very much.
네, 농어촌공사의 해외사
Thank you very much. That was a presentation by Mr. Kim from Korea Rural Community Corporation about a cooperative model for relevant agencies. So we have heard all three presentations. Now we will move on to the panel discussion session. The panel discussion will be moderated by President Kim Hong-sang of the Korea Rural Economic Institute. I'd like to invite the moderator as well as the presenters and discussants. There are two panel discussants who will be joining us online.
네, 토론 시작에 앞서
Before we start our discussion, we would like to check the connection with our online participants. Pleased to meet you. I am Iun Soo of the Korea Overseas Agro Resources Development Association. Can you hear me? Yes, we can hear you well. Yes. Mr. Chuan Chul of the Ministry of Food, Agriculture, and Royal Affairs. Yes, I am connected. Pleased to meet you. I am Chuan Chul. Pleased to meet you. We have heard three presentations, and now we have four designated discussants joining us. We have been given 25 minutes for the discussion. So for the four designated discussants, we would like to give you 4 to 5 minutes for your discussion. Let me take this opportunity to introduce the four discussants. We would like the two offline participants to speak first, and then the two online participants will speak after them. We have with us Mr. Chu Wan-chul, who is in charge of international cooperation at the Ministry of Agriculture, Food, and Rural Affairs. Pleased to meet you. Pleased to meet you, President Kim. We also have with us Mr. Park Jun-yong from the Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology, who is in charge of joint research between Korea and Peru. We have with us from the Korea Forest Service, Mr. Ham Tae-sik. And from the Korea Overseas Agro Resources Development Association, we have Secretary General Lee Eun-soo. Pleased to meet you. So we will start with Mr. Park Jun-yong. Then we will turn the floor to Mr. Ham Tae-sik. Then we will ask Secretary General Lee Eun-soo to speak. And then we will go to Director Chu Wan-chul for your remarks. So let us start with Mr. Park Jun-yong.
Good morning. As introduced, I am Park Jun-yong from the Korea Institute of Ocean Science and Technology. I believe that I was invited as a discussant for maritime cooperation. As I am in charge of Korea-Peru Joint Research Center, I'm going to explain and share my experiences. The Korea-Peru Center is carrying out various projects. In particular, we are now promoting exchanges with the Latin American countries, and in reality, it is part of our efforts to strengthen our ODA for these countries, but no tangible project has been carried out. And there are several reasons why. We did some analysis of what we have been doing for the past several years. When you think about Europe and the US, Other than the budget issues, we have similar ways of thinking and similar approaches, so there aren't many challenges. However, when it comes to working with developing countries where we want to provide assistance, even though we are ready to offer assistance, projects were not carried out successfully. So we did some analysis to understand why. First of all, we came to realize that maybe we had our own ways of thinking and approaches that we thought and assumed that they would have similar approaches and similar framework. But we realized that there were many differences between the two countries or the two sides. As we are promoting global cooperation, especially when you're planning to work with developing countries, we need to move away from the mindset of just giving away assistance, but we need to understand the local situations. We need to develop an understanding of the recipient countries. And then we need to focus on strengthening our training capabilities. Before COVID-19, when you were carrying out an ODA project, what the recipient countries would say would be that they would want us to construct this and provide us with this. But now, due to COVID-19, we're not able to meet them in person. So what they are now asking for is mainly on training and education. As for the maritime affairs, many developing countries are relying on farm fishing because they are primarily reliant on the first industries. And they're asking if we can offer online training for these countries. And in addition to that, developing countries are now understanding the need for training and education, and they came to realize the issues of coastal line degradation and marine pollution, and they want to receive support and assistance in addressing these challenges. So by strengthening training and offering them training opportunities, we can use this as an opportunity to transfer our experiences and knowledge through training, and then we can design an effective ODA project that will befit their needs. As for our institution, we have about 7 ODA projects. In the beginning, it was mainly about farm fishing and also marine resources and species, and that was the key areas in the beginning. But nowadays, there are many other issues, including climate change and coastal line degradation. So they want assistance in terms of responding to these environmental challenges, and also they want to receive assistance in terms of marine warning system for natural disasters. So our institute is now in the process of transferring this early warning systems to some developing countries. This is very important for us as well. Now Korea is affected by climate change as well, and we need to be able to better respond to climate change and mitigate the impact. And a marine early warning and forecast system is crucial. Now, when we make predictions and forecasts, we should be able to access quality data about marine systems of other countries. So by promoting ODA, we can also tap into the data of the marine ecosystem from other countries so that we can advance our own forecast system going forward. Thank you. Thank you very much for your remarks. Due to the time limit, I will not summarize what he just said, but I think there are 2 key points. First of all, we need to understand the recipient country. There should be a mutual understanding. And secondly, there is more demand for assistance in terms of soft assistance, such as training, rather than hardware assistance.
해외 자원 담당
Next, I'm going to ask Mr. Ham Tae-sik from the Korea Forest Service for your remarks. And after all the discussions are made, I'm going to give each presenter about a minute for additional comments. Hello, I am Ham Tae-sik, and I'm going to discuss our international cooperation projects at the Korea Forest Service and what challenges we're experiencing right now. Similar to other organizations, our service has RED Plus projects and ODA projects and overseas forestry development projects. So there are three different kinds. Of course, we do work with international organizations as well. As for ODAs, there are two approaches. First of all, we need to understand what meaningful assistance we can provide to the recipient country so that such assistance can be sustainable. And in that sense, we need to make sure that our assistance is related to the supply chain. Otherwise, it may not be sustainable. What was discussed today was about cooperation among the relevant government agencies, because after an ODA project is over, there will be production and processing and sales, and this is related to the value chain. And in order to encompass the entire value chain, we need to work with the relevant government agencies. And also, we need to consider what kinds of benefits Korea can get from these ODA projects in terms of biodiversity, and in terms of providing business opportunities for Korean companies. Moving on to the RED Plus projects, these are gathering attention these days. For past 5 years, we had some carbon reduction projects for about $1.2 million, and this we would get 69% of the reduction of carbon that we were able to achieve through this project. So I believe that this will invite many other agencies and countries in the future. The RED Plus project is not just about training, but also about environment protection and other elements. So if your ministry or agency is interested, please join us. And there are projects for developing resources, natural resources overseas. One of the reasons why we are engaging in an ODA project is for overseas resources development. And I hope that more Korean companies will go overseas for these business opportunities. In order to do so, businesses need to be prepared fully, but I realized that there were some issues in terms of preparation and planning. So our Korea Forest Service is trying to provide support in the planning stage. And even though we have a wonderful plan, there are some realistic challenges. For instance, there are funding and financing issues. In the forestry sector, these cooperation projects are long-term for 10 or 20 years, and there's initial investment and funding needed, and companies are not really able to cover for this initial funding. When they want to get a loan, they need to provide a collateral, but a collateral for a project of 10 to 20 years is quite significant, and companies are struggling with this. And this is something that our service is considering as well. And now the National Assembly is in the process of revising the Natural Resource Development Act. I think that we should not focus too much on natural resources themselves, but rather approach this in terms of investment for the future. But unfortunately, it seems that the focus is still on the resources. But I believe that we need to build a foundation for Korean companies to operate successfully overseas. Thank you very much. He mentioned about carbon reduction projects and natural resource development projects and also ODA projects. Just like in the agricultural sector, there should be good preparation in advance. And we need to also involve private sector companies so that we can have more sustainable and long-term assistance projects. Thank you.
온라인
We will continue to our two discussants online. We will first go to Secretary General Lee Eun-soo. Thank you very much. I am Lee Eun-soo. First of all, Dr. Kim Jong-sun, thank you very much for your great presentation, and I can relate to your suggestions for improvements. Recently, overseas agriculture is changing in terms of the trend. POSCO Inter is entering Ukraine, and we also see the participation of companies in distribution. So as one of the improvements for indicators, you put a lot of weight on the production volume. As you're well aware, in the beginning, we had a two-track system of production and securing supply, and we actually did not focus on securing supply, but now this portion is becoming more important than before. So when you create indicators for performance, I think this should be taken into consideration. I would also like to make a few proposals. There are two issues that have been pointed out for this project. Many companies have made inroads into foreign countries, but the survival rate is only 33%, very low. And I believe, as you have mentioned in your presentation, that 43% of the companies that register actually did not go to a foreign market. I think the registration system has to be improved. We register mostly because we want to send money overseas, but we sometimes actually go overseas, and when they need additional investment, they register. So I think the registration system itself is an issue. So when you're trying to transfer money overseas, you should give them temporary approval to do so. And then after conducting a business overseas, then they should officially register after they open their business. And so I think we should always look at the figures excluding those who actually did not go overseas. In Russia, there's a center, and in Cambodia, we have an official, and they actually perform a very positive role. Ever since the center was established in Russia, we see two companies that moved into the area and they continued their business. For Cambodia, there were 43 companies who were there without registering, but two registered last year and two this year so that they can participate in our system. So that actually enhances the rate of companies that settle down in the local areas. There are actually companies that are not registered but that are working in overseas markets. We need to register them so that we can enhance the performance results of our project. This project actually provides indirect support such as environmental and market researches. But I believe that you need to send experts to the local areas so that they can facilitate the work of the companies there. For example, when companies are new to that area, they can receive some information and they can also be protected from illegal activities such as fraud. And importing the food produced by Korean companies back to Korea, that's another issue. Well, we have a lot of food brought in from Russia, for example, 58,000 tons of wheat. So that is a positive direction. But because of the G2 war, a lot of the Chinese companies are not importing from the US, and so crop prices are increasing in Russia. And the companies there, they believe that it's better to sell to China rather than Korea. So we need to work on not only securing supply, but we also need to provide incentives for companies that are willing to export back to Korea. For example, providing them with logistical costs. Well, there is a markup cost. For example, we have bidding, but the bidding is a formality. And so if it's just a formality, if we could actually save on those costs, then it would be easier for the Korean companies overseas to export their food back to Korea. Well, we had the presentation by the Korea Rural Community Corporation on ODA. It seems that it would be great to have a collaboration between agriculture-related organizations. But this is ODA from the perspective of Korea. I think you may not be aware of the local situation. And after the ODA project is over, then you need to have follow-up activities. You can work through the companies or the Korean companies working there locally for these follow-up measures. That would be great. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for sharing with us the experience from the field. Thank you very much for pointing out very critical issues. Recently, we see that in Korea, ever since COVID-19, we believe food security is ever more important, and so we need to work on indicators that can evaluate the performance of food supply, but we also need to work on the logistical issues when we are importing food from the Korean companies working overseas. So thank you very much for sharing with us the detailed issues of the companies abroad. So concerning these points, I think we can also turn to Director Chu Won-chul, who is the last discussant. Your discussion, please. Thank you very much, President Kim. I am Chu Won-chul of the Ministry of Food, Agriculture, and Rural Affairs. Thank you very much for your presentations and comments. As you're well aware, ever since 2008, when there was the crop shock, we wanted to diversify the import of food, and we also wanted to respond to emergency situations. So during the last 10 years, we went through trial and error. It seems that we are taking root currently. In terms of volume, given the development area and the imported volume, we have seen significant increases. The point that I focus on is the long-term supply of food. For example, from Russia, we have about 10,000 tons of beans coming in. And concerning these beans, we have tariff benefits, the QRQ benefits provided. More recently, in terms of volume, in the past we only did farm development, but we see that there are more developments in farming and bringing the food back. For example, POSCO not only exports the food back to Korea, but also exports to Europe. So if we take a look at the volume, it's in the warehouse and then it's shipped on vessels. And so it's usually in the bulk vessel scale. So I think we are seeing the fruit of the efforts for the last 10 years where bulk amounts of food is being imported to Korea. And it's a system that is taking root around the world. Concerning future directions, many people mention that are we going to focus on grains and resources, or are we going to focus on facilitating Korean companies moving to foreign markets? Well, in the long term, we hope that Korean companies can work in foreign markets, and we hope that their income could increase through their activities. That is the direction that we need to go in the long term. But in the short term, this year and next year, when we see a spike in crop prices and grain prices, we need to focus on resource development. And so we need to decrease the burden of companies in grain businesses. So for example, if they take out loans next year, we will reduce their interest by 0.5 percentage point. And that budget for the budget for this discount has been passed at the National Assembly. And this loan is for grain companies, but if you wish to receive information, consulting, internships, we will provide additional support for that as well. Let me briefly talk about ODA. So it's been about 10 years since we have worked on ODA for rural communities and agriculture. And it's not about us providing someone with something, But we need to work on the UN SDGs, especially eradicating poverty or hunger. As a member of the international community, we need to surely contribute to SDGs, and that is what we are targeting. So during the last 10 years, we can see two things. First, the increase in volume and efficiency. It seems that at our department, if we work alone, it's difficult for us to increase our volume and scale. So first, what we need to do is cooperate with relevant agencies. We cannot have ODA across the value chain, and so concerning technology and varieties and seeds, and concerning customers and distribution and marketing, we need to work with relevant organizations. And not only should we work through the government, but we also need to have public-private partnership, or PPP, so that we can fill in the gaps for the value chain. So for agro machinery and seeds and variety, as well as food processing and food companies, we hope that companies can be included in this value chain as well. We also need to talk about efficiency. Many people have mentioned the word of sustainability, and I believe that that is quite meaningful. When the projects are over, then everything will stop. That is a concern that we have. The projects that we conduct should not be single-term projects. We could conduct follow-up projects, but that would mean that we need to continue to invest in these projects. So we need to make sure that the recipient countries could include this in their comprehensive development planning, or we need to connect with private companies, or we need to work with international organizations as a part of a multinational project. So even when our budget no longer flows into these projects, we hope that these programs could be maintained in the recipient countries to contribute in the long term to eradicate poverty and hunger. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your remarks. Director Chuan-chal has mentioned this, and we have also heard from Mr. Han Tae-shik of the Korea Forest Service. We need to see a stable improvement and development of companies in Korea, as well as the projects. So in order to do that, we need to think about the whole value chain, the upstream and the downstream. And so we need to change our mindset to view the whole value chain together. In this process, PPP will definitely play an important role. I believe that this is relevant for fisheries as well. So in the beginning, you probably focus on production, and then you focus on distribution, logistics, and education and training. Especially in the process of distribution, when importing grains produced outside of Korea, there are political issues involved, and there are also many insufficiencies in the logistical chain as well. So as Director Chu has mentioned and other presenters has mentioned, we have talked about this in general. So we have heard from four discussants, and we will give 1 minute each to the presenters once again to add to their presentations or comments. Yes, we will go in the order of the presentation. Yes, Director Chu of the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs, and Mr. Lee Eun-soo, thank you very much for your comments. In the long term, the Overseas Resource Development Program should be concentrating on Korean companies working overseas so that they themselves can develop resources on site. But in the short term, we need to establish hubs overseas so that we could supply the shortage of grains and animal feed in Korea. If that is the case, what we could do at our institute is to work with the ministry and also the execution agencies to provide accurate information for accurate decision making. This information should be on the status of the companies working overseas and their markets. So we need to have detailed information provided to the ministry. So we will play the role of providing the relevant information. Thank you.
예, 그러면
Thank you. Next, I'm going to ask Mr. Han to make additional comments. Thank you for all the discussions. In this session, we were able to discuss various issues related to agriculture and forestry, and I was able to see that what we have as concerns are similar to the kinds of concerns in other fields. And I was able to learn a lot from the other presenters and discussants when it comes to going overseas for business expansion and assistance. I believe that there are many areas where we can be involved as well from the marine side. And also in terms of ODA, as many people have already mentioned, we need to make sure that all our ODA projects are sustainable. And in that sense, we need to connect that to the value chain, which means that we need to collaborate with other agencies that can cover other parts of the value chain. And this is all about connection and partnership, and I was able to learn a lot from this session. Thank you very much.
Yes, we will go to Mr. Kim Jin-wook. Well, just like Director Chu Won-chul has mentioned, collaboration between relevant agencies is important. There are limitations of single agencies working alone in terms of budget as well. Secretary General Lee Eun-soo also talked about how we need the participation of Korean companies working overseas participating in the partnership. Well, the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs has a relevant program to include such companies. So I hope that we can work through this ODA platform. And we should not have rhetoric only, so we need to make sure that we have a relevant administrative process. Having listened to the presentation by the Korea Maritime Institute, our corporation also includes fishing villages. And so in conducting ODA projects, we have many experts in this area. So please keep that in mind so that we can participate and collaborate with you. Thank you.
저희들에게 주
Thank you. I believe that we are running out of time. Even though this was a short session, we heard the 3 presentations and discussions from 4 designated discussants. And we were able to understand important lessons that we need to take into account in promoting ODA and international cooperation. And I hope that we will all collaborate in promoting international cooperation in our respective areas. As it is about time to close the session, I'm going to make some closing remarks. Today, in this session, we were able to learn a lot, and thank you very much for your contributions, your presentations, and discussions. And due to COVID-19, there were many restrictions, but we have these presenters and panel members here. And thank you very much to Mr. Han Won-seok for being here and being attentive. In this session, we discussed policy directions and international cooperation in the fisheries industry and ODA sustainability, and how we can connect with different agencies. I believe that our discussions in this session will set a direction and a vision for international development cooperation in our respective areas. I understand that there were many challenges due to COVID-19 as these institutions and agencies pursue international development projects, but I'd like to thank you for your hard work and dedication. And today's discussions are going to be very informative and helpful as we continue to develop ODA opportunities and cooperation with the relevant agencies for international cooperation. And with this, let us conclude this session. Thank you very much.
네, 토론에 참석해 주신
Thank you very much for your participation at this session. We would like to ask the panel on stage to stand at the edge of the stage for a group photo. For those of you who are participating online, we hope that you will participate in the photo session as well.